Hey everybody. So we are going to go ahead and get started on Module 6. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. So we're going to be talking about the first half of the Kindy book. We're also going to talk about the two additional texts, the Denison Bell and the Smallwood et al. Piece. And then we're going to talk about chapter 12. But we'll start with chapter 12 just to kind of get a fundamental base for what we're talking about. Um, also, just a warning, I might pause just randomly in the middle of this or stop the video at seemingly a weird time compared to what I normally do. We've got some pretty decent storms coming through, and so I have the weather on in the background, and so I will occasionally be checking up on that. And hopefully my internet doesn't go out in the process because we've had some issues with high winds and internet here recently. All right, so let me go ahead and get started. So the chapter 12 is going to touch base on multiple things. We're going to talk about some environmental racism and environmental justice, but we're also going to be talking about more so about health inequalities. And this goes back to kind of what we were talking about in one of our first modules when we were talking about health and wellness and the medical field just in general. And kind of all of those things still apply. And what we're going to do now is see kind of the more individualized consequences of a medical system that has biases in it, that has a long history of abuse, that has a long history of not listening to patients that are patients of color. And all of those harms have created situations where there are just a consistent amount of preventable diseases or preventable illnesses that are causing people of color to either lose their life, to be hospitalized when it could have been prevented, or to possibly even just be more sick than they needed to be, which then has more economic cost, right? So then you end up losing more time at work, or you end up having to pay medical bills, or you end up having to pay for the cost of medication, things of that nature. And that has lasting impacts for a lot of people who aren't living, or who do live paycheck to paycheck, or are behind in other economic ways, right? Because those medicines are not an expense that we necessarily plan for or can plan for, depending on where you are economically. All right, so your book kind of starts out talking about a couple of things, and then essentially your book broke things up differently than I'm going to, just because I really wanted you to kind of see most of the health disparities that they talked about in one slide, and then really get into like the environmental causes and things of that nature in the environmental area that we're going to talk about. So I broke it up a slightly different, but most of these things were talked about. And then there are other things in that we could put on this slide too that didn't get in there. And so I think I put again the infant mortality rate and the mother morbidity rates. Well, they do mention infant mortality rates. And I think we talked about that in the other module. It is something that I want to bring up again, just because of the massive amount of issues that are raised there. And the fact that for a wealthy or developed nation, our infant mortality rates and our mother morbidity rates are just astronomically high compared to other countries that are developed and have better healthcare systems. So they did talk about the Black and white mortality gap, and that's just the simple fact that currently it is that white people in America live longer lives than people of color, specifically indigenous people and persons, and Black people are generally they tend to live least long. Yeah, I think that's how you would say that. In comparison to white people. And then then you're going to see higher, like usually, and again, these are very homogeneous categories, so they're going to have fluctuation in them depending on um, other ideas, right? So like when I say uh, the Latinx community or Hispanic community is typically fares a little better. We'll get into kind of some more of that because that's going to be directly tied to, um, oh my gosh, hold on just a second. Yes. Okay. So